Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Wednesday the 10th of February, and joining me on this edition are audio reviewer Ed Selley.
They're in the computer?
Assistant editor Steve Withers.
The man's only got one look, for Christ's sake. Blue Steel, Ferrari, Latigra, they're the same face.
And news editor Mark Hodgkinson.
Moisture is the essence of wetness, and wetness is the essence of beauty.
5-star reviews. We promised we were going to do them. Hark321 said, informative and entertaining. A must for anyone interested in home cinema and audio. Thank you very much for your 5-star reviews.
Anthony Chesson said, CES special was amazing. Thank you very much. AVForums podcast is my go-to podcast for all my audio and video news and reviews.
Informative and entertaining. 5 stars, said Fido 87456. Thanks. I don't know where the other 87,455 people didn't give us a 5-star rating, though. Disappointing.
And on the other hand, Pressure says it was entertaining and informative.
Well, which is it? Is it informative and entertaining, or entertaining and informative? TV Gold said, well-informed enthusiasts, informative without being stuffy. In other words, hardly ever on topic.
Did we miss one there? Because Sebastelona said, strike a perfect balance between entertaining and informative, and the team has a great rapport, which helps. Well, I like the way that we've managed to convince people that we don't loathe each other. Yeah. I think that truly is professional.
Well, we'll only have to pretend for an hour and a half every week, so it's quite easy to do. The difficult times is when having to spend a week with anybody like CES, that kind of thing.
It's not as bad as it used to be, though. We're not in the same bedroom.
Please don't tell people
hotel room.
Oops. Since that messy separation, it's just all gone downhill.
If you want to give us a 5-star review, obviously if you like the show, I mean, we're not blackmailing you just to give us 5-star reviews. I noticed we're up to 60, so thank you very much if you've taken the time to go and review the podcast and give us a 5-star. So if you give us 5 stars, we'll read your name out and we'll read your comments out, even if your comment is informative and entertaining, or entertainment and informative. A perfect balance between entertaining and informative.
You could go a bit meta, couldn't you? Break the fourth wall and use our shout out to give someone else a shout out through your 5-star comment.
I'm lost now.
I'm just confused.
Mark, current competitions.
We've got Rocky on Blu-ray, and that's open to all members until the 15th of Feb. And The Boys from Brazil, also on Blu-ray, and that's active members, and that closes on the 22nd of February.
What a great film.
Any previous winners?
Not this week.
Let's move on. We've got a special guest coming up very soon, so we'll tell you more about that when we get to it. But until we get there, Steve was out of the office. Very rare occurrence these days. He went down to Weybridge, not just for a day out. He actually went to see Sony and the launch of their new TV, so he had to do some work when he was out. And we had a highlight package of their TVs, as is at CES. So normally just show 2 or 3 flagship models, which is what they did. This time around we get to see the full range. So apart from the speakers going from the side of the TVs, seems very much of a muchness.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things they did at least answer on last week, which we were querying when we were at CES, was the decision not to use Premium UHD logo that was announced at CES by the Ultra HD Alliance, which sets a sort of a bar performance level for Ultra HD TVs. Now, their argument was they've got their own logo, 4K Ultra HDR logo that they're going to be using on products that support HDR. So not necessarily all the products that will meet the requirements of the UHD Alliance, but any product that offers HDR in some form or another. So it could be a camera, could be a TV, could maybe be at some point a Blu-ray player. And there is a Blu-ray player in the pipeline, by the way. They said it will be announced, or rather released in this financial year, which in their case starts in April 2016 and goes through to March 2017.
So I think we could safely say Berlin in September might
Either
be a good bet.
If not EFA, CES.
Yeah.
And it would still be within that time frame. But their argument was that they have a logo for any product they make that supports HDR. And they didn't want to confuse the consumer by also having Premium Ultra HD logo on it. Now, I don't see a confusion there because not both of them don't say HDR. But anyway, that was their argument. They did, however, say...
it's going to cause confusion if their TV's got one logo in it, all the other TVs have got another logo.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's be honest. This is Sony. And they're typical Sony, isn't it?
Yeah, they did the same with
They can't
Ultra
just
HD,
go along with the crowd, can they? They just can't go along with the crowd. They don't use Ultra HD, they use 4K. Because again, they think they've got a range of products that support 4K, from cameras to projectors and TVs, etc. And now they're not going to, even though they're a member of the Ultra HD Alliance, by the way, they don't want to use the logo. They did say that if they wanted to use the logo, the XD93 and XD94 models this year would meet the basic criteria. In other words, they would be capable of 10-bit panels, more than 90% of DCI color space, and a minimum of 1,000 nits of peak brightness. I think it's was it 0.05 CDM squared on nits for black level. So they said that they would meet that criteria, as indeed would last year's X94C. Now, obviously, we will test for all this when they come in for review. But they did say they could get the logo they wanted to. They just didn't want to. Okay, fair enough. But yeah, I think if you go to the trouble of creating an organization of all the manufacturers to create a logo to make it easy and simple for consumers to understand what a TV can do, then I'd really recommend using it and not creating another logo just to confuse everybody again.
This is just a throwback to the days when Sony were popular and they were one of the biggest manufacturers, if not the biggest manufacturer of consumer electronics. I mean, we're going back to late 80s, early 90s for that period. I think they haven't gotten over the fact that they are a shadow of their former selves. Yeah. And doing their own thing doesn't always work. And it can, wind people up the wrong way. I mean, they'll have their fan base of a brand fans out there. Every manufacturer does, but they are a shadow of their former selves. They are no longer the number one manufacturer, and but for the last 20 years, they've continued to act as if that is the case, and that they're going to do their own thing. And basically, what they're doing, from what I can tell, is creating more confusion by having their own badges and not taking the industry badge. Of course, they don't have to pay a licensing fee either, do they?
No, I suppose not. But I should imagine there isn't much of a fee. I mean, they are a member of the UHD Alliance. It's not like they were involved in the decision to create it in the first place. But anyway, typical Sony.
Surely they could have both badges. Sorry,
go on, Mark. Sorry.
Surely they could wear both badges. I mean, they could have their own Sony branded HDR and the other one as well. I don't see.
Yeah, but that would be an admission that their own badging was worth squat. So they were.
That's true. Very, very true.
Yeah, they showed us what they did. They went through a presentation talking about the technology in the TVs, and they showed us basically the high-end UHD TVs. There are some other UHD TVs being released, which they didn't show us or didn't even mention, but they did show to dealers and people that run Sony stores. But what they showed us was the S. One thing they've changed this year, which you mentioned previously when we were at CES, they've slightly changed the way they name them now. So now it's instead of X, then a number, then a letter. It's now X, then a letter, then a number. But this year it's the XD 85 and XD 93 and XD 94, and there's also what's the SD 85, which is their curved TV. So you've got the SD 85 curved Ultra HD 4K TV, which supports HDR. You also have the XD 85 flat Ultra HD TV, which also supports HDR. Neither of those TVs support 3D though. So worth pointing out. In terms of screen sizes, the SD85 is 55 and 65 inches. The XD85 goes from 55 to 65 to 75 to a whopping 85 inches. Although I have seen some indications on pricing, and it is pretty toppy in price for the really big screen size. But that's quite a range of screen sizes there. Then they have what they call their hero product, which is the XD93. This uses a variation on the ultra slim design that they were using last year on the X90C. Now that TV, we didn't actually get it in for review, but I have seen it at shows and other places, and I felt that it struggled in terms of its backlight because it's a very, very thin panel with the LEDs along the bottom, and basically it was creating columns of light, and the backlight uniformity was awful. Local dimming didn't work very well. That may be one of the reasons why it wasn't sent out for review. This year, they've taken a similar approach in terms of trying to create a slim design. Obviously, getting rid of the speakers has made that a lot easier. But what they've got is a new version. They call it their ultra slim backlight drive. I think slim backlight drive actually is, and it uses 2 rows of LEDs and 2 light guides. So in other words, they can create basically a grid to enhance the local dimming on the backlight to open up one light guide to let light through from one area and block it from another area. So it makes the local dimming a lot more effective than it was on the X90C. And in the demonstrations that they did, it did look a lot better, actually. They actually showed the that footage that we saw at CES, Phil, of basically the strip at night, the Las Vegas strip at night. They showed that on the XD85 and the XD93. And the backlight uniformity, the blacks and the local dimming was significantly better on the XD93 than it was on the XD85, which has no local dimming, basically. They also show some HDR demos. First of all, showing SDR from TV from last year, then showing the XD85, and then showing the XD93. And you go from SDR to HDR. I think, wow, that looks amazing. And then they went to the XD93, and that looked even better than the XD85. So, it just shows that all SDRs, all HDRs aren't necessarily equal. So that was an interesting demo with the same piece of footage each time. It was basically some footage they'd obviously shot, especially of a camping trip at the base of Mount Fuji. And then on top of the XD93, that comes in 55 and 65 inch screen sizes, and then their flagship model is the XD94, which has a full array backlight, local dimming. Again, has lost the big speakers, and that comes only in a 75 inch screen size. And I've got to say that I thought the last year's model looked awesome. So this year, losing those big speakers, I think is a good thing, because it makes the TV a lot less heavier and a lot less bulky and wide. But you still get all the picture performance. And people buying these kind of TVs, these big screen TVs, they're probably going to have their own sound solution anyway, so they don't really need those speakers. It's just amazing that even though we've been telling them that for 3 years, it took them 3 years to get around to taking them off again. But I mean, I think overall, it's not a earth-shattering range of TVs. I mean, it's more of a variation on last year with a few cosmetic changes and some tweaks here and there. But certainly it looks quite solid, and we'll see when we get them in for testing. But if they do, and they were talking about the color gamut being almost 100% of DCI, 1,000 nits and HDR support. So, they look like a strong lineup.
One of the only manufacturers that seem to have more than one 1080p Full HD TV as well.
They did have 3 different ranges on show, which surprised me. And yeah, they clearly still, it's looking very much like what's happening now is, if Sony's anything to go by, less than 50 inches, you're going to be into your Full HD, certainly from 32 to the 40s. And then certainly all of their main Ultra HD ranges were in the 55 inch and above screen sizes. There are some smaller screen sizes available too, but they didn't show us those at the press event. But there seems to be a clear move towards large screen Ultra HD and then using a Full HD for the smaller screen sizes, which I guess makes sense, really. I mean, I really can't see the logic in buying a 40-inch Ultra HD TV. That just seems like a waste of time. But if you're talking about a 32-inch TV, then obviously Full HD is the way to go. So, yeah, I was surprised they had 3 different models there on show for Full HD, because a lot of manufacturers really are barely mentioning it anymore. It's Ultra HD.
Well, if you look at the product lines, there's maybe one line of Full HD TVs, and like you say, it's normally 40 inches and below or 42 and below, and anything above that is 4K Full HD. So UHD. So interesting that Sony still have that. I mean, that just points to probably they've got some inventory that they have to shift.
Well,
and
I guess they know their sales numbers, they know what's shifting and what isn't, and market research, they're probably presuming there's still a demand for certain screen sizes. Yeah, but you're right, they've probably got a lot of inventory they've got to get rid of. It's interesting that they decided to drop 3D entirely from the SD85 and XD85, which, I mean, I know we've talked about 3D not being a great success and not being that popular at home, but there is definitely a move now towards manufacturers actually dropping the feature entirely from quite high spec TVs. The Philips 8601 didn't have 3D. The LG OLED, the B6, won't have 3D. So there's obviously a move towards just ditching it entirely now. And I'm guessing that's based upon market research and their own sales numbers and the feedback from customers. And I know, obviously, on the forums, enthusiasts like us, well, not necessarily you, Phil, but people that are into 3D will go like, oh my God, they're not doing 3D. But the reality is 99% of people don't give a monkeys. Couldn't care less and have never used it and never will. So it really seems like it's a waste of time for manufacturers to waste money offering features they know no one's interested in, or the majority of people at least aren't interested in. So I can't really blame them for that. And it does unfortunately mean that if you are a fan of 3D and you want it on your next TV, you're probably going to have to move up the range a bit to get it.
Yeah, thanks for singling me out there, Steve.
No, I just know you're not a big fan of 3D.
Speaking on for me, putting
I
words
don't
in my
think
mouth.
anyone is on this podcast with me.
I know, I loathe it.
Sorry, no, none of you are fans.
Yeah, stop singling me out. Stop making it personal. Right, Mark, interesting lineup of products there from Sony, but Steve sent it out. I've looked at it, I've seen the TVs. Yeah, they look nice enough. The picture quality is okay, but they're not a patch on where they used to be, and it seems to be that maybe TV isn't the main thing here. Maybe they're just trying to make it pay for itself, and they're more interested in other products which seem to be, high-res audio seems to be the big thing for them at the minute.
Certainly, sitting back and watching the CES presentation, the TV's definitely got short shrift there. The kind of glossed over them, and then all the press releases were it was one release for all the TVs, and then there was numerous audio products they were pushing. Certainly in terms of getting samples, they're heavily pushing their audio products. So it seems like, that while they have to maintain a presence in the TV market, probably just for appearances, they're just sort of treading water a bit. I mean, I'm sure the top end TVs will be really nice because their flagship TV is always a cracker, but they're failing to inspire me with anything. They don't seem to be innovating. We were rumoured, wasn't it, strongly rumoured before CES they'd have an OLED. No mention, so obviously that's not happening. The lack of 4K Blu-ray player, one's coming, but they should have announced that at CES. They kind of just seem to be treading water in the
But it seems odd that they didn't announce that at CES, and then all of a sudden a UK lineup, it's now on the radar. It seems strange that.
I think because it was highlighted in reporting of it that Sony haven't got a 4K Blu-ray player to announce. Why? If they were planning to release one within this year, surely at that time, surely they would have said at the time.
They would have said, yeah. So
I think it's reactive, definitely.
That's what it looks like. You agree, Steve?
I do agree, yeah. But then again, Sony are a strange bunch sometimes. I mean, I went along to a press launch event where they showed us their new lineup for this. You think you've got journalists there, you want to create a story, you want them to report on things. But apparently, after we left and the dealers came in, they mentioned the ZD9, which is going to be using the backlight master drive that we saw at CES back in January, possibly coming out later this year. Now, that's only a rumour, or at least that's what I've heard reported on the forums from dealers that were at the show after me. But you'd think that's worth a news story, that's worth mentioning. But then when I actually asked them about that backlight master drive, they said they had no plans to use it yet. That's what they said to me on Tuesday. By Thursday, it's a different story. Now, you're thinking, are you nuts? Why aren't you pushing this as this is something we could have made a whole story about that. And that would have been really interesting. And I'm sure we got good coverage, but didn't mention it once. So you've got to question their logic sometimes.
That is strange.
Isn't there a degree of self-fulfilling prophecy here, though? We don't know exact margins as they exist in the television market at the moment, but we know that they're not exactly intergalactic.
To quote Mr. Creosote, they are rougher thin.
Well, there you go. It just seems to be just feeding on from making the TV division pay for itself, that in turn leads to relatively cautious bits of product development, which then further doesn't excite people, which then further doesn't make any money, but they don't want to take the chance and actually throw a significant chunk of change.
Well, they lost a boatload of cash, didn't they, a few years ago, and then they ring-fenced Sony TV off from the rest of the organisation.
It's a subsidiary division now, so they can sell it off if they want to.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's why they did it in the first place, of creating it and turning it into a subsidiary. So, if it doesn't make any money, if it continues to lose money, if they can't see a future in it, they'll just sell it. And let's be honest, that's been happening quite a bit recently with other large Japanese manufacturers. So.
Yeah, okay, so that's a Sony launch. The reports are up on the homepage if you want further reading. And there's also 2 videos as well. So go and have a look at that if you're interested in finding out more about Sony's lineup for 2016. Right, let's move things on. So on this section of the podcast, we're going to get rid of Ed and Mark for a few minutes, and we're going to cross over to a special guest for this podcast. A very warm AVForums podcast welcome to Chris Wray, product specialist from Yamaha UK. Good afternoon, Chris.
Afternoon, sir. How you doing?
Very well, and thank you very much for taking the time to come and chat with us on the podcast. It's always nice when we get a special guest in and someone as knowledgeable as yourself, being the product specialist. I've got loads of questions lined up for you. We've had a few of the new products in for review. Some really interesting stuff AVR-wise, processor-wise and soundbar-wise. But to start off, I think the big thing for Yamaha, certainly from the launch last year that Steve went along to, is your MusicCast. So maybe you could start by explaining exactly what MusicCast is.
Yeah, sure. So MusicCast is, to put it in very simple terms, is a wireless music system. It's very similar to some of the things on the market at the moment in its basic concept, but what we're able to do with MusicCast goes a hell of a lot further than what's available at the moment. Well, it is available now, so it goes a lot further. So with conventional music systems and wireless networking systems, it's generally focused on music and listening to music and putting it everywhere and listening to all the things that you want all the time. But there's usually some kind of limitation, or I can't send that to there or this to here, or there's some kind of brick wall between you wanting to do something. You usually get to a point and you can't go any further. And that's where MusicCast comes in. You can do everything that everyone else can. We can stream music all over the house to any kind of product you like. But where it really shines is being able to do some very, very clever things. So one of the key USPs of MusicCast is that you can share absolutely any audio stream coming into any of your MusicCast products to any other MusicCast products. So to kind of put that in real world terms, let's say you're watching the F1 and the first 5 laps are really exciting, but then they start talking about tyres. And you think, you know what, I'm going to go somewhere else. So you just send that audio stream coming from the Skybox, maybe through your soundbar, to another speaker in another room. They're dead simple. So, and it just works. You kind of share the rooms together, and there's no drawback to it.
So what's the main control system that you would use with MusicCast? Is it an app on a tablet or a mobile?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the app is free, and it is all primarily done on the app. Some of the systems that you'll buy do come with a physical remote, but the best way to take advantage of MusicCast is using the app. So it's free for Android and iOS. There's a tablet version, there's a phone version. It's free to download and try. Even if you haven't got any MusicCast stuff in your house, you can still download the app, and there's a demo version available that kind of just gives you 4 fake rooms and lets you just play around with it and gives you a sort of beginner's guide on how it works. But yeah, because there's so many products to choose from, you can find it in a lot of the products we do. There are 23 different products you can buy now, as of today. There's going to be a few more scheduled later on in the year, and then next year, and the year after, and the year after. So before we know it, we're probably going to be in triple digits in MusicCast, which is going to be amazing. The choice that people have, perhaps a little bit too much in some cases, but things like AVRs will refresh every year, and all our AVRs have MusicCast, all our hi-fi, there's soundbar, there's sound bases, there are wireless speakers, there's microsystems, everything, absolutely everything. So yeah, it's a really, really, to sum it up, it's a really flexible wireless music and audio system with everything you need, like AirPlay and Bluetooth and stuff like that.
Now, is it just a Yamaha ecosystem here, or can you bring in products from other manufacturers that maybe people already own, or is it very much based on your own stuff?
It's a little bit of both. If you want to use the MusicCast app, then that is limited to Yamaha products because that can't control anything outside of it. But let's say, for example, you have a CD player that you really love, and the source is fantastic and you don't want to get rid of it. No problem. Just plug it into a MusicCast amp, and then that input can then be shared to anything else. So yeah, simple as that. You can also do the same in reverse if you use one of our products called the CDNT670. It's a bit of a mouthful, but that particular product has a line out, so you can use that as a MusicCast source and get it into your existing hi-fi or AV system that you already have. And there are plans to expand that later on in the year.
Now, like you hinted at the start of the conversation, there are other systems out there. I guess the most famous, and pardon us for raising this, but the most famous out there and well-known is Sonos, which our 4 members are obviously going to be very familiar with. So how do you compete against a system that has market penetration like that? I mean, what unique features do you add on top of what maybe something like that offers?
Well, I mean, the first thing to remember is that we do everything that Sonos can do, and in a very, very wide range of products. But then you've also got the extra added stuff on top, like AirPlay, Bluetooth built in. You've also got a Bluetooth output built into everything MusicCast. So if you've got existing Bluetooth speakers or Bluetooth headphones, you can use those with your MusicCast products. And again, they work in exactly the same way. There's no limitation, you can't stream that over to there. It just works. So it's just a very, very flexible system. The AirPlay element is really nice. We've had a few people kind of send us feedback, and now that the product has started to get into the market, we're getting a lot of good feedback, particularly on AirPlay and Bluetooth, because it means you can play anything. If you're using, for example, Spotify, and maybe you're not a paying user, and therefore you're not going to use Spotify Connect, the free version will still work with MusicCast. So you can still listen to MusicCast from your phone, Spotify, from your phone, and send that audio over to a MusicCast product via Bluetooth. So there's you can be flexible with it. You can do whatever you like.
I've actually been living with MusicCast for the last week. And in an interesting way, it shows you the breadth of products that Yamaha have put MusicCast into, because I'm reviewing an AV receiver and a soundbar, and that's the reason I'm reviewing them. But it happens they're also MusicCast products, and you've given me a wireless speaker, 2 wireless speakers, ISX 80 and WX30, I think it is.
Yep, that's it.
And again, they're MusicCast speakers. So without even really trying, I've created a 4-speaker or 4-unit MusicCast system within my home. So I've got a MusicCast device in the home cinema, one in the lounge, one in the study, and one in the bedroom. And I've tested quite a few music. I mean, when I first saw MusicCast, when you first launched it last year, I was impressed by 2 things. One, it appeared very flexible, and 2, it was in almost all of your products, which I thought was a great thing, because a lot of multi-room systems, they are very much a series of products on their own. And it's a kind of a separate little ecosystem of products you have to buy to get that multi-room functionality. Whereas, as I'm experiencing right now, it's just already there in so many other products that by default you're creating a multi-room system, even if you don't necessarily want one. Also, and this is really key as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to any kind of multi-room system, anything where you're running it from an app, it's got to be easy to set up. And I can vouch for the fact that I thought MusicCast was really, really intuitive and simple to set up, which is, because I've had a few in the past where it's quite laborious to get them set up and not that obvious. MusicCast, dead easy to set up. It works very well. It's robust. I haven't had any dropouts or problems or crashes. So for my initial experience of MusicCast so far, I've been really impressed. And just to check one thing, Chris, this is not a new name, is it? I think I might have heard MusicCast in the past.
No, it is not a new name. I'm glad you brought that up, actually. No, we did originally have a system called MusicCast back in 2003. The way I've been kind of referring to it in my head is because the old MusicCast had a capital CAST at the end. So I kind of, for some reason, I just hear that as MusicCast, and I hear the new one as MusicCast. So it's a northern and southern version for us Brits. But yeah, no, in 2003, we originally launched the world's first wireless network audio system as we understand it today. The idea was there. The idea actually hasn't changed an awful lot since then. You had some wireless speakers, you had a control system, you had to get it all together. The difficulty was that the idea was there, but the technology wasn't really caught up with it. Wi-Fi was a bit patchy if you had it. You needed a server, you needed a controller, nobody had a smartphone, it just kind of didn't really work at the time, but the idea and concept were there. So eventually we said, well, you know what, let's come back and fight another day, and here we are, we're back and we're fighting another day. So it's so far the uptake has been really, really good. And we're seeing a lot of positive feedback from people who've bought it and people who've been using it, and a lot of our retailers as well who saying, actually, there's something special here.
It's funny you should mention the AirPlay capability, because it is really flexible, and that was one of the things that I really like, because, like I said, I've got one of the wireless speakers in the study, and I use a Mac, and I just immediately connected it to AirPlay and was just listening to music from my Mac into the wireless speaker. It took me a few seconds, and it works really well. So I've got to say, I was impressed when you announced it. I thought this could be good if it works, and at least now I can now say, hand on heart, yep, it works. It works. It's robust, it's effective, it's simple, it's intuitive, and that's all you really want from any multi-room system. But more importantly, I think, you're probably going to, if you buy Yamaha products, you're going to end up with a MusicCast system anyway, whether or not it's something you initially wanted, which I think is quite clever of you, actually.
Oh, thank you very much. Unfortunately, it wasn't my idea, but I think it's, you're absolutely right. It is very important. We've got a lot of customers who still buy traditional AV receivers, and, this home cinema is a massive market, and it's something that's incredibly important to us. We're not letting that go. And in fact, funnily enough, the other day I was having some discussions with Japan on the future of home cinema, and, all sorts of ideas were coming out of the woodwork from all sorts of people. So, 10 years from now, who knows what it will be like. But the main point is that we're thinking about this is, where do we take home cinema, not how do we escape it. We want to develop it as time goes on. And I think networking audio is very much key to that. So yeah, absolutely. You've bought a Yamaha AV receiver, maybe a soundbar, something like that. If it's something we launched in 2015, chances are it's got MusicCast on it. There's a few products we have that don't have it yet. But eventually the plan is that when we start launching new product every year, as we inevitably do, eventually everything will have MusicCast on it. So, unfortunately, you won't be able to escape MusicCast. It'll be there whether you like it or not.
Now, you mentioned AVRs there, Chris. And one of the features that's always been prominent on AVRs and processors and so on from you and from other companies is separate zones. So zone 2, zone 3, so on. And hand on heart, I've never looked at doing that because it's always seems to be quite complicated. How you add an extra section or an extra room onto that. But MusicCast takes care of that without a hell of a lot of issues. And I'm assuming that one of the ways forward would be to maybe have 5.1 through a MusicCast system.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely on the table. In fact, when we first started discussing the relaunch of MusicCast a couple of years ago, it was one of the first ideas that was put on the table is, can we do this? There are a couple of systems out there that do something like a 5.1, but as far as I'm aware, it's not a specific traditional system as we would understand it today. The thing we want to be able to do is be able to provide discrete 6-channel, at least, surround sound without any kind of problems with Wi-Fi or signal or sound degradation or anything like that. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it properly. So definitely on the table, definitely on the table. And we want to get it done, but we need to do it right. So we're not going to rush and get something out there that's half cooked. We want to make sure it's of decent quality. Absolutely. But I mean, the things that we used to do with zones and using cables to another set of speakers in another room, you're absolutely right, Phil. It's not something everyone wants to do. I mean, even in my own home, I don't have a second zone set up because I just, I live in a rented home and therefore I can't knock the walls through, unfortunately. But, if you want to run cables to a second set of speakers, go ahead, no problem. And you can even control that second zone through MusicCast. There's no reason why we should let go of the ways that we've been doing it for a long time, because that's how a lot of people do custom install. It just means that AVR, that 3050 that's got 4 zones on it, you can control them all through MusicCast. And guess what? If you want to add a few more later, just add some wireless speakers. But it also means the entry-level AVRs get some love in terms of extra zones. So even on our RXV 479, our first networked AV receiver in the range, you can add an extra zone to that with an extra speaker or something else. You can think of it like that, because the RXV can stream everything to that extra speaker.
I guess the missing component here is video. So is it something, I know it's called MusicCast, so therefore, the assumption is that it's an audio-only system, but I guess, just thinking out loud, the next step has to be video, does it not?
Well, wouldn't that be lovely? I think, again, it's something that was mentioned quite early on in the development phases, but the realization we quickly came to was actually we'd need to develop a whole new back end to do that. And also the bandwidth requirements are massive. I mean, if we consider file sizes and bandwidths of things like high-res audio, like a DSD file, you actually need quite a robust network to get that to stream. Generally over Wi-Fi, it's going to be a bit of a struggle unless you've got a very good Wi-Fi setup. Just the realities of the world that we live in and all sorts of Wi-Fi interference. Don't turn on your microwave while you're listening to DSD. Or put it near a fish tank. Just, FYI to anyone doing that out there. That might be why you're having trouble. So it becomes an issue when you've got lots of bandwidth going around a network and maybe you haven't really accounted for that. But I think, video there's no reason why eventually we can't get there. I think it's something that we'll get to. I wouldn't say in the next couple of years, but maybe beyond that, we'd be wanting to do something like that. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's move on to AVRs, which is my favourite subject because I still love the good old AVR. And again, just because you're on the podcast, I'm not sucking up to you in any way, Chris, but my history has quite a few Yamaha products in it when it comes to AV. And I've been into this hobby nearly 30 years, 25 years at least. My first one was a DSP, now was it A1 or 1? I can't remember. It was a ProLogic only AV receiver. And then the next one after that was my pride and joy for many years. It was a DSP A3010, which was the first ever Dolby Digital AC3 AV receiver on the planet, as I understand it. And I remember going and dropping a hell of a lot of money that weekend. I bought that amplifier, I bought a new Pioneer Laserdisc player, and then of course...
That's going back a few years now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, 1993 or 94? I think it was as far back as that, maybe even further. And I remember going out that afternoon and having to buy as many of the Dolby Digital laser discs I could find. And I remember going into a couple of AV sadly long gone AV stores, and they always had the under the counter Laserdisc collection that you could buy.
It sounds really dodgy.
Well, it does, doesn't it? But that was the way it was back then, because if it didn't have a BBFC sticker on it, then they weren't really supposed to be selling it. So yeah, it was always the box under the back. Can I have a look at the Laserdiscs?
Oh, nice. Okay.
So going all the way back there, and one of the things that I vividly remember, and I even set a pair up to test them out, and that was the fact that Yamaha products have had presence speakers. You've had height speakers going back at least 25 years on your product range. Isn't it funny that 25 years later we're now bolting speakers to ceilings and putting up height speakers because of the audio formats we have now? Now, either you guys knew the future, or you got a crystal ball, or you've got a DeLorean.
I'd definitely opt for the second one if I had a choice. That would be awesome. I'd love that. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of nice when you look back to the original DSP-1. I mean, and you've had some heavy hitters there, Phil. The A1, the Z. What was it, Z1 or Z11?
No, I didn't have any of the Z ones. It was the 3010.
3010, that was it. Sorry, A3010, yeah.
And sadly, I went to the competition after that. So
it's all right, I won't hold it against you, don't worry. But yeah, since the DSP-1, which was 1987, that was the world's first home cinema processor, and it was the first foray into the world of actually getting home cinema into your home. And even that had ways of getting presence speakers into it. So even then, we were saying, actually, you know what, if you want really good cinema, you want speakers above you as well as on level with you. So, I mean, it's always been close to our heart. I mean, you guys might be familiar with our cinema DSP tech and how we do that. I mean, for those who are listening who aren't familiar with it, cinema DSP is the whole reason why we launched home cinema, because we were recording real venues around the world. So, you know, we can't call them by their real names, but certain cinemas and certain theatres in the UK across the world, and stadiums and venues and everything, you name it, we've probably been there and probably recorded it and measured it in 3D. Even back in those early days, we had a 4-point microphone that was developed by Yamaha and one of the Japanese universities. And it just came with these incredible results, because it meant that you could get these real sound fields in your home. Now, some of them, in fairness, we look at them now, some of them are pretty much, they're a test, a show test. So you can put yourself in a church in Freiburg, and the only thing that's ever going to sound good there is dry chamber music. But try and play a movie in church in Freiburg and it sounds a bit weird. But from all of that technology and from all of that development has come modes like sci-fi, which is an awesome cinema DSP mode. I mean, my amp at home, my amp downstairs is pretty much permanently set to either sci-fi or straight or pure direct or something like that. But sci-fi is fantastic because it gives you this amazing surround environment, even with normal speakers. And you add presence speakers in, you get this whole extra world. So, I mean, for us, it's just fantastic because it means that Atmos, DTSX, all these new formats coming out are really taking advantage of technology we've had waiting in the wings for, well, it's going to be 30 years this year, is the launch of the DSP-1. It's going to be 30 years of Yamaha home cinema. Which is really cool. So yeah, for us, it's just it's fantastic and really, really pleased to see it.
It's a bit of a trend developing here of you being years ahead of the game.
Well, there have been a lot of world firsts from Yamaha. The first home cinema, the first soundbar, the first music network system, the first. I was told the other day the first commercially available CD recorder, which was us as well. Then you got the not the first ones, but you got some really famous speakers in there like the NS10s. NS1000s, which we dug out a set of the other day, which look a little bit battered, but they look awesome. Very, very iconic speakers, and there's a lot of history there, an awful lot of history with Yamaha, and it's gone to show that over time it has paid off.
It's interesting that you mentioned history there, because you're not only an AV company, Yamaha, you've always been spread across motorcycles and musical instruments and all that kind of thing. And I guess the main thing here is that musical instruments, loads of history there in terms of what an instrument should sound like in a given environment. So, I mean, maybe I'm putting two and two together, but I would imagine that if you have experts who tune pianos and build pianos and test acoustics and all that kind of thing with different instruments, then that gives you some kind of headway when it comes to trying to reproduce that sound in the home through your electronics.
Absolutely, absolutely, 100%. If you've made the instrument, you understand the sonic characteristics of a violin, and you know that violins are actually often used in concert halls. That kind of lends itself nicely to home cinema. I mean, we are primarily a musical company, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we focus in one particular area. It just means that music is in our blood. It's what we do. 90% of the people at the office play musical instruments, and those that don't, they get given a kazoo. So the Christmas parties just fly by, I promise you. So, everybody there loves music for one reason or another. Some of them are producers, some of them are musicians, some of them are rock and rollers, some of them have lived it, breathed it, done it. Some of our technical guys have, they've gone on the road and been roadies for all the big acts through time, and now they're just kind of there fixing stuff, which is, music is a very, very important part of Yamaha, through and through, for everything we do.
So when it comes to today's products, this is where I'll let you do your sales pitch for this year's products, but we're looking at the 1050, the 2050, 3050 and the CXA 5100 processor. These are your big headlining products for the year. They're all Dolby Atmos. They're all going to receive, I understand, a firmware update in the spring to make them DTS-X compatible. So what are you hoping to achieve this year with your products?
Well, to be honest, it's kind of interesting because those high-end products are targeted. The Avantage lineup, as we call it, our high-end AVRs, the Avantage lineup was originally conceived in the US, or at least the idea was. And the idea was to create this custom install LED product, which also had the heritage and quality of hi-fi products that Yamaha's had for years and years and years. So we come up with this really, really high-end performance amp, or range of amps rather, that do all sorts of things, but also have a lot of custom install capabilities like extra zones, being able to program them, all the latest tech, stuff like that. I think for us, the home cinema market is, for us, it's been pretty good, and the high end does particularly well because you're buying a decent product. Hopefully, if you're looking at a high end product, hopefully Yamaha will pop up on your shopping list or your maybe list, and then hopefully pop up as a receipt in your pocket. But fingers crossed. But yeah, it's I think DTS-X and Atmos have definitely been big contenders in getting more recognition into home cinema, so that's been really great. HDR as well is an interesting one. The technology, while we're obviously an audio manufacturer, we don't make any TVs, actually it does directly affect us because these AV receivers and things like that are going to be receiving these signals from external sources. So the update for the 1050, 2050, 3050 and the CXA will all contain an HDR update as well. And yeah, that should be rolling out in the spring.
Quick question, Aura 3D, will you be supporting that format? You're supporting the other two?
At the moment, there's no plans to support it. However, that's not. I never say never because sometimes we'll go, actually, we can do this, and then we'll do it. One of the attitudes we have within Yamaha is that, maybe attitude's the wrong word, one of the ways we like to work is that if we can do something, we'll do it. If we're able to support things through a software update and it works well, then we will. You can nearly always get something to work through, some paper clips and chewing gum and rubber bands and stuff like that. But, unless it's going to be really good and actually work consistently for the customer, then we want to make sure that people have a good experience when they use Yamaha products. Otherwise, they can't be reliable, and that's another one of our key USPs is Yamaha products are very, very reliable. You get 3 years warranty on an Avantage product by default, and then we'll still look after you. It might cost you to send it to the service centre, but we'll still look after you, no problem.
Now, it's great that this year's products are all going to be supporting the two main immersive audio formats, but we have had questions on the forums from our members, people who own the 3040 from last year and similar models, asking why they're not getting an update to DTS-X. Is there a reason why the older models are not capable of being updated? I'm
told it's to do with the processing power. I'm told the way in which DTS-X utilizes the Cinema DSP chip inside, or rather the DSP chips, I should say, is very different to that of Atmos. And the reason Atmos is able to do it and DTS-X isn't on the older models is purely down to the amount of horsepower we got under the hood. The good thing is that we're able to catch it reasonably early, so we're able to do it with this year's models. As you know, I'm sure you guys know, there's been a few delays with what's coming out with DTS-X and when it's coming out and stuff like that. So we've been trying to work as fast as possible. But yeah, the main factor is processing power. Now, that's not to say that you can't still enjoy your extra speakers. Going back to what I said about Cinema DSP, one of the big things about that in our own tech is you can take any stream you like, whether that's 2-channel, mono, True HD, DTS Master Audio, any of that stuff, and you can use the Cinema DSP to take advantage of all of your speakers. Now, it may not be exactly the same as having object-based audio flying around your room, but if the DTS Master Audio track is actually any good and it's mixed okay, then actually you'll still get a pretty impressive result from your 3040, and even stuff that's been there previously. I mean, we doing some tests, it's not the same, but it's still a really, really good experience, because those presence and ceiling speakers can really sing once you get them to do all sorts of things with the Cinema DSP.
Okay, so if I'm going to be honest with you, Chris, I was never sold initially on the idea of immersive audio, mainly because I couldn't see 90% of people ever having it in their living rooms, and let's face it, that's where the vast majority of people's home cinemas are, their living rooms and living spaces, and partners are never going to allow speaker cables running all over the room, never mind speakers bolted to the ceiling, and then going for a 714 system where you got 4 speakers on the ceiling. It's an impracticality for the vast majority of people, which is why I've always thought that it was going to be a niche. However, having now lived with it and having bolted speakers to the actual speakers to the ceiling and so on, it is an absolutely gobsmacking experience. It really does add an extra layer to the sound, to the sound field, to what's going on, directionality effects and all that kind of thing. It really does add something else to the sound. So for those that for domestic harmony can't have speakers on the ceilings, and they don't have bat caves like myself and Steve where we can get away with doing things like connecting speakers, what's Yamaha's solution to that?
Well, there's a couple of things you can do. First of all, if you are an AVR owner and you do have Cinema DSP and you've got something from this year, I think for the past 3 or 4 years, I'd have to go and double check my notes, but I think since the 71 or maybe 73 series of RXVs, don't quote me on that, go and check your manual. But we have a technology called virtual presence speakers, which, as the name may suggest, creates virtual presence speakers. So actually not in a dissimilar way to how the DTS upmixing works. We can create virtual presence speakers if you've got a 5.1. So actually you still get the height element without the speakers there. Now, it's not going to be the same, but it's still going to give you a lot of oomph from it. And as you say, Phil, you get this 3D engulfment of sound, and it just sounds fantastic. The other option, of course, is you could look at, it's quite high end, but you could look at the YSP 5600 soundbar, which features Dolby Atmos, features DTS:X, or will do with the firmware update, and has up-firing speakers in it. So all you need is a soundbar and a subwoofer, and you can get the same or similar performance to that of a basic home theater with Atmos.
I should probably clarify that by saying you need some space to put that soundbar into as well.
You might need a little bit of space. It's not a small soundbar. You're absolutely right. It's not a slimline one. A lot of the time we're seeing these go in as new build projects when people are saying, I want home cinema, or I want a decent sound in another room, or they want it in their main living room, and they're wall mounting a TV, then you would look at doing something like that. But yeah, if you've got a small TV stand, it is quite tall. So just bear that in mind if you're looking at it. But you do get this incredible performance. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts. You do get something for it. It's not just it's tall for the sake of being tall.
No, I appreciate there's an awful lot of speakers and amplification built into it, but I just thought I'd just point out to people that they're thinking and getting it as a solution, and it is an effective solution. It obviously avoids the arguments with your partner about putting speakers all over the room, but you will need a significant amount of space to put that in. It's going to, you can't just stick it in front of the telly. It's going to probably need to be wall mounted, ideally, I'd think, or you had to have either a stand that can accept it or a custom made enclosure. But it is quite large, much larger than your average soundbar.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. And yeah, if you're gonna get one, try and wall mount it. If you can't, not a problem. We've been using our sets when we've been demoing them with hi-fi racks, with a few of the ones that they make. They have more than enough space to accommodate. And there are other stands out there which will accommodate, as long as you keep the soundbar near to the front, so the upfirers have somewhere to go, then that's fine, not a problem.
Or in my case, a couple of coffee tables.
IKEA, £7, can't argue with that. Yeah, no, that works. I've seen worse.
Well, I'm sure someone like IKEA will come out with an Atmos line of stuff like that. It's interesting that you mentioned upward firing as well, because I think it's an interesting point to make, is that all your AVRs and the processor, when you go into the configuration menu, there is a selection for the Dolby speakers. So Dolby certified upward firing speakers, and there's a couple of manufacturers have got their versions of those out there. So if people are using those, then they need to remember to go into the configuration menu. And what processing does it actually do, Chris?
It's kind of it works with the YPAO, the Yamaha Parametric Acoustic Optimizer, if you want to get really nerdy, double points if you can remember that. And it tries to calibrate the sound in such a way so that it almost bounces off the ceiling. Very similar to how our YSP technology works, but not quite the same as I understand it. So yeah, it's trying to calibrate the sound so that it will bounce off the ceiling and towards you. The disadvantage, at least in my own findings with upfirers, is that you do often have to have them quite close to you in order to get them to do anything. If you have them quite far, if you've got a big room and you're using upfirers, do try and make sure that you either angle the upfirers a little bit more towards you or move them closer to you, because you might find that actually the Atmos effect gets a bit lost if you're trying to project the sound too far. But that's not to say they don't work. They absolutely do work. In fact, I was down at Dolby the other day and just seeing a couple of guys down there, and they got a little demo booth with tiny little upfiring speakers, but the effect is there. Couldn't if you've got a way to accommodate it and you've got it a way to get them to bounce off the ceiling effectively, then yeah, absolutely, good option.
The upgrade that's coming out that adds DTS:X and HDR. So as it currently stands, if you have, for example, an A3050, the HDMI inputs are HDMI 2.0?
Right? At the moment, yes.
And the upgrade will convert them into HDMI 2.0A.
Yes, as far as I understand, yes, it will be that.
Okay, and because that was an area where we've been asking that question from a number of manufacturers over the last year or more, and they haven't. The answers have always been a bit vague, as they weren't quite sure. So I guess my question is, how have you managed to do it?
Well, it's more compatibility rather than a full blown HDMI 2.0A. Because when new hardware and new stuff comes out, you need to change the hardware in order to get it to be compliant. But what you can do sometimes is make a software upgrade that will at least make it compatible with everything that will come in, but won't give you the full-blown spec of 2.0A. In the reading that I've done, there's the stuff that you might be missing. I think there's some of the copy protection possibly, or that's more to do with HDCP. But yeah, it won't be full-blown HDMI 2.0A, but it will be compatible with anything that comes in using that kind of signal.
But I guess it can pass the metadata from HDR.
Yeah, that's more to do with it. It's the metadata and passing the signal is really the focus of doing an upgrade like that, so that at least customers aren't left out.
Yeah, so the AVR is not going to be doing anything to it; it's just passing it through, basically.
Yeah, very similar to how we do our 4K pass-through at the moment in something like a YSP 2500. That can do a 4K pass-through, but it's not the full 4K processing, but it will pass through the signal absolutely fine.
And it's HDCP 2.2 compatible, isn't it?
Yes, everything is HDCP 2.2 at the moment. As you go up and down the range in AVR, you get more inputs, more outputs, stuff like that. I think in the Avantage range, pretty much every input on the back at least is HDCP enabled.
Less of a question, Chris, and maybe some constructive criticism. It's one of the things that both Phil and I have discovered through using, in my case, the AVR, the A3050, and in Phil's case, the processor and power amp combo. The setup menus are not the most intuitive, I have to say. I found that from a couple of instances, I actually had to go, and I hate doing this, I had to go into the manual and actually look through to find out a couple of things that didn't quite make sense because they wasn't really explained very well in terms of actual setup. So if I had a suggestion for future development, it might be to perhaps, and also I think the menu system is looked the same for quite some time now. It could maybe do with a bit of a makeover, and it could do with being slightly more intuitive to use. I think it is a bit unnecessarily complicated, I think is the word.
Yeah, the difficulty you've got, I absolutely, to be honest, I agree. I think we need to be thinking more about customer experience with our products. And one great shining light in that is the MusicCast app.
I was just about to say, get the best design MusicCast app to design your menus.
Yeah. Well, it's 5 Japanese guys who sit in a small room, and we occasionally let them out. But they're really good at what they do. So, yeah, I mean, the MusicCast app has been, I think, part of a turning point for Yamaha, because it means that we can show, look, we can do this amazing design stuff, and actually the user interface is really good. And the feedback we've had confirms that, and from yourself, Steve, and from customers, from retailers, from anyone really, they're saying, yeah, no, it's actually really good. There's usually 1 or 2 things people want, and a lot of them are, yeah, that's actually quite a good idea. In fact, recently when we were talking to people on AVForums in our feature thread, there were a number of really good suggestions that came in. So a lot of those have gone back to Japan. But yeah, I completely agree. I think we need to be looking at a refresh. I think we need to be looking at how customers actually use our products, because a lot's changed in the last couple of years, an awful lot, and it's moved at a tremendous pace. So yeah, I think we'll be looking at how we ask customers to use our products. There's a few different ideas floating around, but I think it won't be long before something looks different in the future.
Good stuff. It's nice to hear a manufacturer taking feedback from customers, because I think that's, well, it can only ever end up in better products at the end of the day. So it's nice to see that Yamaha are taking that on board. Chris, it's been great having you on the podcast. I'm sure our forum members have got lots of questions coming out of this interview. So if it's all right with you, we'll obviously catch up in the very near future, certainly before the end of the year, and maybe do part 2 of this once the products are out there and once people have had a chance to use them and own them and have more questions. Then we'll come back and do another interview if that's all right with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we'll be expanding MusicCast this year. We'll be expanding AVRs this year. There'll be all sorts of new stuff coming. But I can't talk too much about it now because it's all under embargo. But yeah, later on in the year, there's definitely some room to do all sorts of things. So yeah, I'll be happy to be back, and it's been a pleasure.
Excellent. And if anybody has got questions for Chris, or just questions in general about what we've discussed during this segment of the podcast, you can ask your questions in the podcast thread underneath this podcast in the forums. Right, so once again, thanks to Chris for coming along on the podcast. And interesting, Ed, that a lot of focus there on MusicCast, but I guess, even though it was an old product back in the day and it's relaunched, everybody seems to be moving to smart home technology. The smart home is the big buzzword at the minute, and MusicCast certainly falls into that scope.
Yes, definitely. I think Yamaha have been slightly more ambitious in as much that they've seen beyond simply the sort of connected home bit and actually worked out how to make use of their existing sort of product areas in such an undertaking. But yeah, I mean, finally, there's a degree, that there's protocol and basic equipment in people's houses that makes it a functional and practical proposition. So Yamaha were probably way too early to market with the original MusicCast system, as was discussed. And it's impressive that they were able to persuade the accountant side of the business to go back to it. But it does show in that they're just, again, being sufficiently ambitious to push it a little bit further and do a little bit more with it. But we are going to see more and more of this, because for the first time, it's something which can be done extremely easily for end users. They're not having to do any significant modification or did any modification to the structure of their house to do it.
Is the problem the fact that everybody's now doing this, and if you have to stick to one company's ecosystem, then you're kind of not being able to use other people's stuff? Or do you think that the fact that Bluetooth is prevalent amongst all these, that you could actually use different makes and models?
Well, there's a couple of ways of looking at this. When you're dealing with Yamaha, they've got enough products that are now MusicCast capable that, yes, okay, you could see a limitation to being stuck into one brand, but it's not really restricting your product choices. And then in the case of Naim, they've gone a different route. They're not about sort of AV or multi-channel or anything like that. They have simply found way that they are, with the Mu-So systems, it's bringing new customers in at the bottom and then allowing people who have existing Naim systems to make use of their music library in other rooms at a sort of sound quality and aesthetic level that they're sort of happy with. If you really, really want to, as you say, there are means of getting multiple devices to sort of start making, at the very least, making use of the same library and talking to one another. If you go for non-specific UPnP control apps, it's perfectly possible to flick between different devices and they can make use of the same library. You do miss out on, if you like, convenience and nicety features like party mode, where everything is synced up and playing at the same speed, same point in different rooms. And obviously Yamaha and there are other systems coming which do this as well, where one point there's not just one central library, if you will, but a number of different devices can then be used to shunt material over the rest of the network. That's something that it's fairly bespoke, so that is going to depend on there being a single brand. But the DLNA, and I always get the letters wrong, I'm pretty sure the Digital Living Network Alliance and the broader UPnP protocols do mean that if you've got network capable products, it is possible to sort of use them in an ad hoc multi-room way without too much issue. You just miss out on some of the sort of bells and whistles features.
That wraps up our hardware for this week. We'll be back in a sec with movie reviews. Okay, so moving on to movie reviews, and we know what's been at the cinema, because given the choice, it was Dad's Army or Point Break, and it looks like the review that turned up on the homepage was Point Break. So I think we know how that conversation went, Steve. Yeah,
in fairness, there was a second reviewer, Kamari, but she was away this week. I don't know if that was intentional or whether she just said that so she wouldn't have to go into Dad's Army. But I think we discussed it at length last week, and I'm judging by the review, Sharoona's review of Point Break, and also looking at the reviews of Dad's Army I've read in other newspapers and that sort of stuff. I think we were pretty much bang on the money as far as those two films are concerned. Certainly as far as Point Break goes, Sharoona is, like us, a fan of the original. And I think she hit the nail on the head. They just called it something else. And it had just been a film about, a bunch of extreme sports nutters, all those wingsuit flying idiots you always see getting killed every now and then, robbing banks and then FBI agents trying to capture, get hold of them.
I've never seen that, Steve.
Yeah, well, I think
a winged idiot killing himself.
I'll digress for 1 second. Okay, there's an excellent series on BBC4 called The Brain with I think his name's David Eagleman. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's really good. But last week's episode was great. It was talking about how much of the brain, almost all of the brain, is subconscious and just operate automatically without even thinking about things. And in fact, the conscious part of our brain is a very small part. They were showing a guy who does that free rock climbing, and he's sort of hanging from the side of a cliff face, just by his hands. And they were saying that when he's climbing, they're interviewing him, and he's talking about when he's climbing, he almost is entirely instinctive. His brain is on autopilot. He's not thinking consciously about what he's doing, because as soon as you start doing that, you'll kill yourself. And I said to Laura as a joke, I said, I'll really laugh at the end of this. They have a thing saying, and this is dedicated to the memory of so-and-so. And as soon as the interview had finished, the voiceover said, sadly, 3 months after this interview was conducted,
this is inevitably
died in a wingsuit accident. And those wingsuits. Anyway, back to Point Break.
Well, I think with the original, again, was pioneering, was the fact that extreme sports weren't a big thing back in the 90s, certainly in the mainstream. Surfing and skydiving and all that kind of thing. This was well before Red Bull got involved with everything extreme and publicising it and pushing it and all the rest of it. So again, that was another factor of the original, which made the original stand out at the time. It was because it was covering subjects that people didn't know. But apart from the surfing, people weren't really up with people who throw themselves out of planes for fun and extreme sports and that kind of thing. So anyway, moving on. Films released this week, and again, it looks like, well, there's one decent film in there, I think.
Yeah.
Pride and Prejudice Zombies.
For all you Jane Austen fans. Zoolander 2 actually had previous screenings at the weekend, so Kaz has already seen it. And sadly, and he's a fan of Zoolander, and he said it's very disappointing. Gave it 5 out of 10. He wasn't happy at all. Basically, not enough jokes, or any jokes would be good. which isn't surprising. I think 15 years after the previous film, that's just a long time between two movies. We've also got Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which is based upon a book, which is obviously based upon the original Jane Austen novel, but with zombies, of course, which looks silly and aimed more at teenage girls, I'd say. And also we've got Deadpool, which I'm really looking forward to. I've seen the trailers for this. I've read the stories surrounding its production and how it got made. And I think this actually has potential to be really enjoyable. Very funny, super violent. And with a character who basically knows he's a character in a movie. So he's breaking the fourth wall a lot, and there's a lot of meta jokes in it. So I think that looks quite interesting. I'm looking forward to that. That opens up on Wednesday night. Wednesday, rather, during the day here in the UK. And Pride and Prejudice and Zombies opens on Thursday. Blu-rays this week, we've got The Martian and Pan. I have not seen Pan, but I hear it's not very good. And The Martian I have seen. It's excellent.
you have seen Pan. Well, you've seen a clip of Pan.
A bit of Pan, yes.
in HDR.
Yes, I have indeed. I've got to say, it looked fantastic in HDR, but the film itself apparently not very good. But The Martian is excellent. I've also seen that in HDR, of course, as well, as have you, Phil. But that's a great movie. I really enjoyed it. And it's also worth getting in 3D if you like 3D still, because I thought 3D was very good in it. And it's native 3D, which is a nice change these days.
Now, does it apply? I noticed your review today of The Wire. You said it had to be on a big screen. Is that the same for The Martian?
No, The Martian you could enjoy because it's about, creating a sense of depth within the image. With The Walk, it's about looking down from that wire and being up
no,
there.
You see, I'd be happy seeing that on a small screen where you didn't get the full effect.
Full screen. If it fills your field of view, like it did when I saw it at the IMAX Laser Cinema in Leicester Square.
Is it bottom clenching?
Yeah. I mean, I've got to say, the real guy, Philippe Petit, to take that first step out onto that wire, balls the size of church bells, because I'm not kidding, I would have absolutely crapped myself at the very thought of it, never mind actually physically doing it. And they do. An idiot, wasn't he? They definitely, in the film The Walk, they definitely give you the merest sensation of what that must have felt like without being, utterly terrified as well. But
you see, Steve, his brain. The way his brain was working, he wouldn't see that as a risk at all. And if you listen to him in the interviews in the documentary, and he's been on a couple of other things over the last few weeks, obviously with this coming to the cinema and then onto disc and home formats. When he talks about it, he sees it as no risk whatsoever. He doesn't see it as frightening or risky or anything like that. And you got to think, guys, crazy.
You can mitigate risk to a degree by knowing what you're doing and preparing properly and everything, but there's always an element of chance, isn't there? What if a seagull had flown up his bum or something while he was halfway across?
Why did you think of that?
On YouTube, that.
Why did that come to your mind and not a gust of wind, which is more likely?
We're about to get a whole dark world of Steve's terrified seagull.
He had thought about the wind factor, hadn't he? Because he'd chosen a day where he hoped the wind would be minimal, etc. And he had to allow for, like I said, you can plan and allow for lots of factors, but there are things you just can't allow for. Some idiot going by in a wingsuit, I presume, would be out of the blue. Anyway, Martian, excellent, good 3D. Ridley Scott looks fantastic, worth watching. Good story too, really enjoyed it, and a great performance from Matt Damon. Although I would have to disagree with the Golden Globes. I don't know how the hell it won Best Musical or Comedy, because it's neither. But anyway, to categorise it as when it isn't either of those things.
Well, they just wanted to give it an award, didn't they?
They wanted to give it an award. It wasn't going to win the drama one because The Revenant.
Obviously, the studio had paid for it, so there you go. Blu-ray releases next week. Crimson Peak, that's another DTSX release, isn't it?
That will be the first DTSX release in this country, and it'll be the third that I know about. But the first one, I think, actually released in the UK, yes. And it's Guillermo del Toro. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think that should have an absolutely stellar sound design. Really should be good. The programme's about Lance Armstrong and the Irish journalist who spent almost his entire career trying to expose him for being the massive cheat and scumbag he actually was. And Hotel Transylvania 2 is a sequel to the animated film Hotel Transylvania with the voice of...
surprisingly like.
Yeah, it was actually... I don't really like Adam Sandler, but I guess in animated form he's more bearable.
You don't have to see him.
So sadly, time's cut up with us yet again. It has been a feature-packed podcast. We hope you have enjoyed listening. And all I need to do now is thank Steve Withers.
It's that damn Hansel. He's so hot right now.
Mark Hodgkinson.
I'm not an ambi-turner.
And Ed Selley.
This has been an emotional day for all of us. I think we should get naked.
Don't. I've got some horrible bloody images in my head now.
What has been seen cannot be unseen.
On that one, give us a 5-star.
Please.
Oh dear!
Give us 5 stars or we will get naked.
I think somebody asked last week if we would ever do a video podcast. No. No.
You don't want that. No, but the world is not ready.
Just doing that on there, so definitely.
Anyway, don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, Bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and video, and of course, leave us those 5 stars on iTunes and we'll read your name out at the end of the month. I'm Phil Hinton, thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.